In this video, we'll go over the best support cards for normal monsters, even as some of the support cards only work on a very specific type of normal monster. And at number 10, we have Painful Decision. This card allows you to search out any level 4 lower normal monster from your deck, as long as you send a copy of that same monster from your deck to the graveyard first. Now, at what first seems like a cost in order to search out a card, is actually a huge benefit because this card essentially allows you to mill a normal monster to the grave, while also getting to add a normal monster to your hand. So it's kind of like a Foolish Burial and a Summoner's Art all in one. And it's the dual nature of this card that allows it to make this a list of good support cards. However, this card is a hard once per turn, which makes sense considering this is a pretty good effect. So you can't use multiple copies if you draw all of them in your opening hand during your first turn. And it requires you to have at least 2 copies of the same monster in your deck. And it doesn't work if you only have 1 copy of a monster, as it has to send a monster to the graveyard in order to add the other one to your hand. But those downsides are kind of reasonable, considering the nature of this card, as there's many ways to recover normal monsters from the graveyard, and there's even ways to special summon the normal monster from your hand, which segues into the next spot on this list. And at number 9, we have Link Spider. This is a Link 1 monster, which just requires 1 normal monster as its materials, and has the effect where you can special summon a level 4 lower monster from your hand to a zone this card points to. Now, this card sees tons of competitive play, but not really for its effect. It's because this card can be brought out with basically any token, and allows you to convert tokens into effect monsters on the field, which are much better used for other Link monsters who require effect monsters as their materials. And in addition to being an excellent token support card, it's also just really good with normal monsters, as it allows you to special summon one from your hand to a zone this card points to. As one of the problems with normal monsters is that they don't do anything on their own. That's kind of the whole point of normal monsters. They don't have effects unless they're like a pendulum monster who kind of cheat by having pendulum effects. And some of those are really good. And Link Spider allows you to use normal monsters to bring out this card, which will then allow you to special summon one of those dead cards in your hand. This requires almost no setup rather than just having 1 normal monster or token on the field, and it's a straight off 1-for-1 trade. There's lots of normal monster support cards that allow you to gain advantage by adding them to your hand, because normal monsters are kind of useless in your hand, and Link Spider lets you turn those into monsters on the field, which becomes much more useful. There was this one card back in the days of Bubble Beat called Hero Blast, which allowed you to add a normal monster from your graveyard to your hand, and then you could destroy an opponent's monster if they had less attack than that card. And what was great about this card was being able to destroy a monster while also getting a monster back in your hand, even if hero decks didn't really have a way to take advantage of that extra monster in their hand. And Link Spider kind of gets rid of that restriction, and makes normal monsters in the hand actually valuable, which makes it an excellent normal monster support card, even if it's rarely used as a normal monster support card in actual competitive play. And at number 8, we have PACIFIS, the Phantasm City. This is a field spell card which allows you to add a Phantasm Spiral card from your deck to your hand if you summon exactly 1 normal monster. And the Phantasm Spiral cards are excellent normal monster support cards in their own right, as Phantasm Spiral Battle allows you to destroy any 1 card on the field and can be activated from your hand. And Phantasm Spiral Power is basically an infinite impermanence that also reduces the attack of your opponent's monster, which can also be activated from your hand. And the field spell card can also summon a 2000 attack token if you do not control token and your opponent activates a card effect. And this token summon is not once per turn. So if your opponent destroys your token and then activates another card, you'll be able to special summon another one. And since tokens count as normal monsters, you'll be able to search with the field spell card off of that token summon. PACIFIS and the Phantasm Spiral archetype are excellent normal monster support cards that would almost be perfect if it weren't for the fact that they lock you out of using non-normal monsters. If you control an effect monster, you can't use the Phantasm Spiral cards, and the field spell card locks you out of summoning effect monsters during the turn it uses either of its effects. That's why this card kind of has a low spot on this list, even if it has excellent support for normal monsters, because unless you're only going to be using tokens or normal monsters, then this card and its archetype does not play well with other cards and archetypes, like extra deck monsters, for example. It's a very unfriendly deck to affect monsters that just happens to also have very good effects with only normal monsters. Most of the other cards in this list will be a lot more friendly with other archetypes and types of monsters though. And at number 7, we have Carboneddon. This is a dinosaur monster, which can banish itself from your graveyard to special summon a level 7 or lower dragon type normal monster from your deck. So it's kind of like an Orcust Harp Horror for normal dragon type monsters, except one that doesn't lock you out of other kinds of summons during the turn and use its effect. And this card actually does see a lot of competitive play in a whole host of different kinds of decks, because being able to special summon a monster from the deck on a graveyard effect is super good, which is why Orcust Harp Horror is currently banned in the TCG. Although it's pretty specific on which normal monster they can bring out from the deck, and it itself is a dinosaur type monster, so it can't benefit from dragon type support, which would be the best way to play this card. But even with its awkward typing and low stats, the effect is just so good that people play this card anyway. And at number 6, we have Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi. This is a counter trap card that can only be activated if you control a face-up non-effect monster, which does work with normal monsters as well as a whole bunch of other different types of monsters who don't have effects on them. And what it does is it allows you to negate the effect of any card, but not destroy it, which is unfortunate because this card would be so much better if it negated and destroyed the card. However, it has another effect, where if this face-down card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck. So, if your opponent pops this Omni Negate in your back row, which is already super good if you do get to use its main effect, you can then special summon a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon directly from your extra deck, which is even better if you have the Tenyi Field Spell card out as well, which will make that Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon immune to monster effects. Basically, the whole Tenyi archetype revolves around supporting normal monsters, and does so in a way that doesn't lock you out of using effect monsters, like the PHANTASM Spiral archetype does. And the Tenyi cards are also really good, and the trap card is an Omni Negate, which is good against literally every single deck, which just happens to have a bonus effect if it's destroyed in your back row, a bonus effect that's basically a Waking the Dragon. And the Field Spell card allows you to draw 2 cards if your opponent summons an effect monster while you control a normal monster, and gives your normal monsters protection from your opponent's monster effects. And then all of the Tenyi monsters have effects that activate from the graveyard, which only become live if you have non-effect monsters on the field. Although out of all of the Tenyi cards, I think the Field Spell card and the Counter Trap card are the 2 best, with the Counter Trap making this list from the entire archetype because it's more useful than the Field Spell card, which itself is super amazing. Being able to draw 2 cards every turn while also gaining protection from it is good as well. But an Omni Negate with a built-in Waking the Dragon is a little bit better. And at number 5, we have Rescue Rabbit, a card which is able to special summon 2 normal monsters from your deck, as long as they share the same name and are level 4 or lower. Now, a little history on Rescue Rabbit. This card came out after they banned Rescue Cat, which is a card that lets you special summon 2 beast-type monsters from your deck as long as they were level 3 or lower. And people used Rescue Cat in order to pull off all kinds of OTKs, to the point where they eventually just banned the card because it was too easy to recover and didn't have a hard once per turn on its effect. So people were just reviving Rescue Cat over and over in order to use its effect multiple times per turn, which was fetching 2 monsters from the deck. So when they released Rescue Rabbit, they sought to fix all of these problems. First, it would only work on normal monsters, so you could no longer pull off cheesy strats with effect monsters it might bring out. It only worked on the same normal monster twice, so you couldn't pull off any combos with bringing out a tuner and a non-tuner monster. They gave the card a hard once per turn, they gave the card a restriction where it could not be special summoned from the deck, as well as a restriction where it had to banish itself in order to activate its effect, instead of sending itself to the graveyard. And even with all of these restrictions put into play, it turns out pulling 2 monsters from the deck is still super good, and this card immediately saw the rise of the Dino Rabbit decks, which would pull out 2 dinosaur normal monsters in order to go into Logia or Dolka. And it was such a good meta deck that they limited Rescue Rabbit to 1 in the ban list, and it basically stayed restricted for years, until a few years ago, where they finally loosened its restrictions on the ban list, and even then it's still a great normal monster support card. Carboneddon special summons one normal monster from the deck, and it sees lots of competitive play. Rescue Rabbit special summons two, but it needs to hit the field in order to do that, which kind of limits it. But it's still a really good effect as well, and is only really beaten out by the top 4 spots because they're a little bit easier to use or have more broken effects. And at number 4, we have Dragon Shrine. Now, this card is simultaneously normal monster support and dragon type support, and it's basically like a double Foolish Burial. You can send one dragon type monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if it was a normal dragon type monster, you can then send another dragon type monster from your deck to the graveyard. This second one does not need to be a normal monster, however, which is what gives this card so much value and why it takes a pretty high spot on this list. Now, there are a lot of dragon type normal monsters, and there's also some really good dragon type monsters with normal monster support that also have graveyard effects. World Chalice Guard Dragon, for example, can banish itself from the graveyard to special summon a normal monster from your graveyard to a zone a link monster points to, which is really good if you send a normal monster to the graveyard first with Dragon Shrine and then use its second mill on World Chalice Guard Dragon, which will then almost immediately allow you to special summon a normal monster from your graveyard that you just place there yourself. You can also send Guard Dragon Prominences, who can special summon itself from the graveyard if a normal monster is sent to the graveyard. And there's even Destrudo as an option, who can also be a target for Dragon Shrine after a normal monster is sent, to just have a really good dragon to bring out from the grave. Although the 2 Guard Dragons I mentioned combo better with normal monsters specifically, so let's kind of leave it at that. Suffice to say, there's lots of dragons that can be sent to the graveyard for some kind of advantage, especially the dragon rulers themselves. And there's also 5 dragon normal monster tuners in the game, 3 of them being level 2 or lower, which allows for some really good combos if you can special summon them from the graveyard with stuff like World Chalice Guard Dragon, or with the number 3 spot on this list. But before I end it here, just note that Foolish Burial is limited for a reason, and Dragon Shrine is like Painful Decision, in that it allows you to get a normal monster in the graveyard while also allowing you to do something else beneficial, except it's more beneficial to send an effect dragon monster to the graveyard than it is to add a normal monster to your hand, as funny as that may be to say. And at number 3, we have Tri-Wight, a card which can allow you to special summon 3 normal monsters from the graveyard, although with the caveat, it can only special summon level 2 or lower normal monsters, and you must bring out 3. So getting 3 level 2 or lower normal monsters in your graveyard can be quite difficult for the average meta deck that might just be running one of them with Draconet or something, bringing it out for synchro plays. Although, this is where some of the previous spots on this list come into play. Cards like Painful Decision and Dragon Shrine allow you to meet the requirements of Tri-Wight pretty easily. And then if you're able to pull off Tri-Wight, this card is a +2 in card advantage. Although card advantage means nothing if the cards you gain advantage from are useless. However, that's not the case with normal monsters on the field, especially if you bring out some of the tuners, like the 3 dragon normal monster tuners, which are all level 2 or lower. That allows you to go into all kinds of link summoning plays and is super valuable for those reasons. With a single normal summon and a Tri-Wight, you can bring out a 4 monster Apalooza, Bow of the Goddess, which would give it 3200 attack and a whole bunch of negates, or just any other really good link 4 monster. Being able to generate +2 in card advantage on the field is great. The only downside to this card is that, obviously it only works on low level normal monsters, and it requires you to set up your graveyard. So it's not really something that can be played outside of a deck that is specifically trying to use this card. But even that being the case, it's still excellent normal monster support, even if it's kind of specific in which kinds of normal monsters it supports. And at number 2, we have Unexpected Dai. This card is like a Hero Lives, only for any level 4 or lower normal monster, in that you can special summon a low level normal monster from your deck as long as you control no monsters. And since being able to special summon from your deck is the best place to special summon monsters from, and the fact that this is attached to an easy to activate spell card makes it pretty powerful, to the point where it sees all kinds of play in the meta, even though meta decks run like less than 3 normal monsters in their deck total. Because being able to get a card on the field without using your normal summon and directly from the deck, so you don't have to set up your graveyard or anything, is just super good for so many different kinds of combo plays, as this card sees play in World Chalice decks, Gem Knight FTK, Orcust Guard Dragon, Dino Rockets, Noble Knights, etc, etc. If a deck uses normal monsters that are low level, there's a good chance they're also running Unexpected Dai because it's such a good card. And of all the cards in the list, this is probably the only normal monster only support card that sees regular competitive play. You know, besides Link Spider, even if it's not the number one card on this list. And at number 1, we have Treasure Panda. This card has the effect where you can banish up to 3 spell or trap cards from your graveyard in order to special summon a normal monster from your deck, who has a level equal to the amount of cards you banished. So if you wanted to cheat out a level 3 normal monster directly from your deck, you'd have to banish 3 spell or trap cards from your graveyard. Pretty simple, straightforward, and powerful effect, especially if you bring out a tuner monster from the deck with this card. It essentially becomes a 1-card synchro. However, here's the thing about this card. It special summons monsters from the deck pretty easily, and does not have a once per turn on its effect. If you have 20 spell or trap cards in your graveyard, you can special summon 20 level 1 normal monsters from your deck in 1 turn. If you're able to mill a massive amount of spell or traps into your grave, and then have an equal amount of normal monsters in your deck, you can just bring out as many as you have the resources to bring out with Treasure Panda, which is kinda broken, and yet this card doesn't see any competitive play because of a few reasons. For one, it requires you to play a whole bunch of normal monsters in your deck if you really want to take advantage of this card's effect. And that's generally not a good idea, as normal monsters are pretty bricky if you actually draw into them in your opening hand. Something that's kind of alleviated thanks to Link Spider, but even then, if you draw 5 normal monsters, you basically can't do anything. It also requires a whole bunch of spell or traps in the graveyard, which requires a lot of graveyard setup if you want to bring out a whole bunch of monsters. If you just use things like Dragon Shrine, Painful Decision, or Unexpected Dai, or any of the other really good normal monster support cards I talked about, there are cards which generate advantage for you and also get spell cards in the graveyard, which could then be banished with Treasure Panda in order to bring out level 1 normal monsters from the deck, to go into all kinds of different plays. When it comes to supporting low-level normal monsters, Treasure Panda has the most broken effect out of all of the normal monster cards. Although its downfall is that to take advantage of this effect, you have to play a whole bunch of normal monsters, which is generally not advisable because they don't have effects and can't really do anything without amazing support. But even if you only use its effect a handful of times during your turn, that's still a lot of advantage, especially if you're only bringing out level 1 normal monsters. So this card kind of has to take the top spot on this list for its crazy effect, even if Link Spider and Unexpected Dai are the most played normal monster support cards. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other normal monster support cards that I might have missed, or have ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And did you know, only 27.1% of people who watch these videos are actually subscribed to the channel?